Real quick, before we launch into today's episode, I just created a new free guide where I'm answering the 10 most common questions first-time writers ask when they feel overwhelmed, confused, or stuck. Questions like, how do I stop second-guessing everything I write? How much backstory do I need? How do I keep going when my draft is a complete mess? How do I structure my story? In this guide, you'll get my honest, practical answers along with action steps you can take to keep going and finish what you started. Download your free answer guide at nancypanuccio.com/guide. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/guide. Readers don't need answers right away, but they do need to feel the pull of the unknown. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. Well, hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Writer Unleashed. Today, we're zeroing in on one of the most important parts of your novel, your first chapter. This is your moment to pull the reader in, ground them in the world of your story, and ignite curiosity about what's to come. Easier said than done, I know. But if you've ever rewritten your first pages over and over and over and still wondered, is this working? Well, you're in good company. Every writer worth his or her salt struggles to find their footing in those opening scenes. It's a process. So in this episode, we're walking through 5 of the most common mistakes writers make in their first chapter and what to do instead. These mistakes can quietly lose your reader before the story even gets going. So we're going to unpack each of these mistakes one by one so you can write a first chapter that truly hooks. Let's get right to it. Mistake number 1, starting too early or too late. A common trap is opening with a character waking up, making the coffee, commuting, thinking about their day, but nothing's happening yet. Or the opposite, you start so deep into the action that we don't know who we're watching or why we should care. We haven't had a chance to develop an appetite for the character and his or her situation. A good rule of thumb is to start right in the middle of something changing, a moment with tension or disruption that invites the reader in. You can always weave in context later. Readers are subconsciously asking, why today? Why this moment? If the answer isn't clear, they'll drift, they'll get bored, and you'll knock them right out of the story. So you want to ask, what has shifted for my character in this very first scene? Why are we meeting him or her now? We want to meet your character where there's already some unrest, where things are already off balance. For example, the novel The House in the Pines begins with this. Maya didn't know it yet, but the video had already begun to circulate on social media. So we get a little more about the grainy 6-minute stretch of security footage, and then we get this. But for Maya, its existence would upend all that she'd been building for herself these past few years. That's all in the first paragraph. We meet her where things are already off balance. Notice we're not getting the contents of the video. It's being withheld. Maya doesn't even know about the video yet. And we're wondering, what's on that video? Is it a video of her? The promise is we'll soon learn. It's a great hook. Now, your opening doesn't have to be anything dramatic. For example, here's the opening paragraph in the novel The Ice Age. On a Wednesday in the second half of November, a pheasant flying over Anthony Keating's pond died of a heart attack, as birds sometimes do. It thudded down and fell into the water, where he discovered it some hours later. Anthony Keating, who had not died of his heart attack, stared at the dead bird, first with surprise. What was it doing there, floating in the duckweed? And then with sympathy, as he guessed the cause of its death. He goes on to describe the dead bird in gorgeous detail, and then he ends the first paragraph with this. It had had the pleasure, at least, of dying a natural death. So in both cases, we're meeting these protagonists where something is already off balance, where there's an element of tension. With Maya, it's the viral video. With Anthony Keating, it's the dead pheasant. So think of your first chapter as the originating event of all that follows. Try cutting the first page or two of your draft. Where does the tension actually start? Now, most new writers make their first chapters way too long. Your first chapter does not have to be long. It's an introduction to your main character's world. It establishes who the story is about and the conflict to come. It's an introduction. You need to get in and out relatively quickly. Now, I'll talk more specifically about first chapter length later in the episode, so stay with me. Let's move on to common mistake number 2. Front-loading the backstory. It's tempting to explain everything up front, who your character is, what happened in their past, how they got here. But if we're not emotionally invested yet, none of that will land, and it pulls our focus. It slows down your first chapter with a lot of unnecessary bloat. So hold off. Let us experience this story first. Drop in bits of backstory only after we care about what's unfolding. The story hasn't earned the emotional payoff of backstory unless we're first grounded in the present. Story works best when meaning accumulates over time. So ask yourself, what parts of your backstory can wait? And what can you show in real time through behavior or dialogue? Here's a quick revision tip. Highlight every sentence in your first chapter that explains the past. Ask, can this be revealed later through conflict or choice? For more on backstory, listen to episodes 50, How Much Backstory Does Your Reader Really Need to Know? And episode 202, 3 Secrets to Writing Effective Backstory. Episodes 50 and 202. I'll link in the show notes. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 3. No clear story question. If your first chapter doesn't raise some kind of question or dilemma, readers won't know what they're reading toward. They'll drift. They'll feel unmoored. Sometimes there are too many balls in the air. There are too many questions raised, too many dilemmas, and so the story loses focus. Or the main story dilemma isn't properly set up. The reader wants to lock in on one central problem from which every story event and every scene revolves. Everything that happens should revolve around that problem. For example, In David Nichols' novel, You Are Here, the first chapter sets up the co-protagonist Marnie's problem. She's lonely, not romantically, but she works at home, she's divorced, and proclaims by the end of the first chapter that it was no good. She would have to go outside. Now, the first chapter is only 3 pages long, but it sets up a central problem that we know she will spend the rest of the novel trying to solve: how to get back out into the world and solve her loneliness problem. We also know that this isn't going to be an easy fix. So now we're asking, what is she going to do? How will she fare? We're already expecting that she's going to be awkward and resistant. At the end of the first chapter, in the house in the pines, Maya does come across the video introduced at the beginning while scrolling YouTube in an attempt to sleep and calm her anxieties. She watched a short video about a cat who'd raised an orphaned beagle as its own, then one of a Boston Terrier with a talent for skateboarding. Later, she'd wonder if this was why the video popped up in her feed. Girl dies on camera. Of course, she clicked. So she recognizes the man in the video from her past, and here's how the first chapter ends. The video had been posted less than 3 days ago and already had 72,000 views. Frank had every reason to think she would see it, which meant she had every reason to be afraid. After all, this wasn't the first time Maya had witnessed someone drop dead in his presence. Okay, so now we're getting an introduction to the main story problem this novel will circle around. Notice we do not get the backstory about her past with Frank. We don't know the nature of their relationship yet, but we trust that those details will be revealed as the story unfolds. And we also expect that the novel will revolve around Maya and Frank and that she's in some kind of danger or threat. So you want to introduce a compelling problem, tension, or mystery. Again, you're introducing it, not giving it all away. We should feel pulled forward, wondering what will happen next. A story question creates curiosity and momentum. It gives the chapter shape and purpose. Readers don't need answers right away, but they do need to feel the pull of the unknown. So ask yourself, by the end of your first chapter, what question is the reader dying to have answered? Here's a quick revision tip. Write a one-line story question your first chapter raises, then check. Does your draft actually suggest that tension, and does the rest of your story move towards answering it? Okay, on to mistake number 4, a passive or inactive protagonist. If your main character is mostly observing or reacting, it's hard to get behind them. Readers are drawn to characters who want something, even if they don't get it right away. The want might be to avoid something. It might be to get something. So you want to give your protagonist something to pursue, even if it's small. A decision, a goal, a desire. Even if they're stumbling, they should be engaged in the action. Great stories are about obsessive compulsive characters. We never want things to just happen to your character, even in the first chapter. The reader doesn't want to be trapped inside the character's mind, thoughts, and stream of consciousness. Desire drives the story. So you want to ask, what is your character trying to do in this opening scene? What does he or she want, even if it's just to avoid conflict? So back to Maya in the house in the pines. When we meet Maya, she's on her 3rd sleepless night, and she just wants to sleep. We learn slowly why she can't sleep. But what does she do to sleep? She doesn't just lay there and think about how sleepless she is. She takes action to solve her problem. She hadn't seen the video because she was avoiding all screens, not wanting their blue light to keep her awake. She had tried everything to sleep: Benadryl, melatonin, counting backward from 100 down to 1. She had turned the clock around, taken a bath and some cough syrup, but none of it helped. And at some point, she takes out a bottle of gin from the freezer and drinks to help her sleep. She's desperate. What we soon learn is that the reason she can't sleep is because she's experiencing withdrawal from Klonopin, an anti-anxiety med. She's not just experiencing insomnia and drug withdrawal, she's actively trying to solve her problem. So you want to give your character a goal for the first scene. It doesn't have to be huge. Even trying to stay invisible in a crowded room creates narrative energy. Even trying to sleep creates tension. Okay, last one, number 5, overcrowding the stage. Writers sometimes introduce a whole crowd of characters at once, and it's hard for readers to keep track, especially when we don't know who to focus on. Writers sometimes introduce too many characters too soon, especially in family sagas, school settings, or fantasy worlds. The reader can't anchor emotionally because they don't know who to focus on. The House in the Pines starts with Maya and her boyfriend Dan, but the focus is on Maya. Frank is off stage, but notice the action isn't crowded with too many characters. It's Maya, Dan, and Frank, and that's it. Maya takes up most of the narrative space, as she should. Dan gets a little narrative space, but only as it relates to Maya. And Frank, the main antagonist, is off stage, but very present in the first chapter. So a character can be off the page in your opening chapter, but we should get a very clear introduction on his impact on your main character. Readers need an emotional tether. They don't care about the cast until they care about the main character's experience. So you want to ask, are you grounding the reader in one character's perspective before widening the lens? You want to limit named characters, especially in your first chapter. Keep it focused. Let the supporting cast unfold gradually and always through your protagonist's lens. Okay, let's talk about your first chapter's length. You want to keep your first chapter relatively short. You want it to engage the reader early without overstaying its welcome. There's no hard and fast rule for how long a first chapter should be, but here are some guidelines depending on your story and genre. Typically, first chapters in novels range from 10 to 20 pages, but I've read great first chapters that are only 3 pages long, 6 pages long. 6 to 15 pages is the general sweet spot. 8 to 14 pages is common for many debut novels and tends to work well for engaging readers early. Thrillers, young adult, and commercial fiction often lean shorter, closer to 6 to 10 pages to create fast momentum. For example, The House in the Pines is a psychological thriller, and its first chapter is only 6 pages. Literary fiction and epic fantasy might go longer, sometimes up to 20 pages if the pacing supports it. But you want to focus on function over length. A strong first chapter should introduce your protagonist and hint at what they want, ground us in a time, place, and tone, raise a compelling story question or hint at tension, and spark curiosity. Who is this person? What's at stake? If your first chapter delivers those things clearly, whether it's 3 pages, 7 pages, or 15, you're on the right track. Okay, here are those 5 common first chapter mistakes and what to do instead. Number 1, starting too early or too late. You want to begin in a moment of change or tension. Cut the warm up. Start where the story actually begins. Do start where things are already off balance for your main character. Number 2, dumping backstory too soon. Let us experience the story first. Drop in bits of backstory only after we care about what's unfolding. Number 3, no clear story question. Raise a question or hint at a problem that makes readers invested so they want to keep following your main character. Number 4, a passive or inactive protagonist. Give your main character something to want or pursue, even if it's subtle. Let them act. And mistake number 5, too many characters introduced at once. You want to anchor the reader in your main character's experience. Keep the focus tight in your opening chapter. Let us see the world through your character's lens before widening the frame. Your first chapter does not have to be perfect, so don't get stuck here. It just needs to invite the reader in to raise a question, spark curiosity, and make us care. Now, if one of these mistakes or several of them showed up in your draft, don't worry, you're not alone. Every writer fumbles their beginning at some point. The key is to see what's not working and being willing to reshape it. So if it's not quite clicking yet, that's okay. Keep refining it. The clarity will come in the process of writing. Most writers return to their first chapter again and again, especially after they've written the ending. Once you know how your story resolves, you can craft an opening that truly sets it up. So that's all I have for today. I hope these tips help you write a more compelling first chapter. When you start strong, you build trust with the reader. You make the reader lean in and say, I'm in. Take me there. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.